What's that?
We're only missing James.
Jim's not coming.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is a time and place set for the regular August City of WROK Planning Commission meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we'll start by introducing folks, and we're going to go all the way down over there by Doug. If you guys can start by introducing yourselves for the record.
Alex Jaworski, Rural Planning Division. Doug Hedges, Planning Division.
Brian Cooper.
Charlene Douglas, City Commissioner.
Joseph Murphy, Director of Planning.
Josh Markham, City Attorney's Office.
Woody Gontina.
Mike Fournier, Mayor.
And I'm Gary Cassetta, the chairperson. All right, so the first order of business, before we do that, anybody have anything to add to the agenda tonight? Looking around, seeing none, we'll go on to the first order of business here, which is the approval of the meeting minutes for July 8th, 2025. This is the meeting that was chaired by Mr. Gontina in my absence. Thank you, Mr. Gontina. Have the commissioners had a look at these, and do they have any questions, comments, or corrections, or a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Mr. Cooper. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. All right, any discussion of the minutes for July 8th? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for the voice vote. All those in favor of approval of the minutes for July 8th, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, motion passes. Minutes are approved. All right, next order of business. Public comment on non-agenda items. If you're a member of the public and you'd like to speak to the commission about a non-agenda item, this is the time to come on up and introduce yourself and tell us your thoughts. You may come up.
I'm not sure if the presentation is going to be given regarding the form-based code, or an opportunity to interact with it or not, assuming it's not. I'd like them to address what will be the impact of the form-based code on currently single-family zone areas, very specifically missing middle, how that will be affecting single-family areas, and also auxiliary dwelling units. As far as the request by Kroger's to postpone, I guess I'm wondering why you don't just administratively postpone the thing. I'm hoping that you're not going to deny them, because if you do, unless they make a substantial change, they're going to have to wait a year before they come back before you. Hoping that's not the intent. I do ask what standards you're going to apply to Kroger that were not applied to Sheetz. The ordinance has 9 specific criteria that should be addressed individually. And that's regarding any request. And then lastly, I don't see Dave Woodward in the audience. I'm wondering whether he has lobbied against Kroger.
Thank you. Oh, that would be nice to turn on.
All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to come up on a non-agenda item? All right, very good. Let us move to the next item, which is number 4, presentation on form-based codes by Rangwala Associates. Mr. Murphy.
Yes. Between the recent adoption of the master plan and the commencement to start writing a new zoning ordinance, staff believes that it's appropriate to gain a better understanding of several key items that will undoubtedly be part of the rewrite of the zoning ordinance. One of those key items being form-based codes. So tonight is training and education session on form-based codes for staff. It's also for the Planning Commission, and it is undoubtedly for the public. And we're fortunate to have with us tonight Kaiser Rangwala of Rangwala Associates. Kaiser specializes in design, planning, and economic development services. And several years ago, I had the pleasure of going to a multi-day training session on form-based codes. Kaiser was an instructor, and I was thoroughly impressed with his knowledge and skills. So we reached out to him recently, and he was able to join us tonight for a training session. So Kaiser is, if we can have him displayed on the screen, we can see his smiling face. And he's going to provide us with a presentation of an introduction to form-based codes. Kaiser has indicated that he's got some natural breaks in his presentation. So as he's presenting, I would encourage you to write down or keep your questions in mind. When we get to those natural breaks, you can ask the question, and then certainly there'll be time at the end for questions and answers as well. But with that, unless you have any questions, I would, through the magic of technology, we can have him displayed on the screen, and he can give us a brief introduction and start his presentation.
All right, any questions from the commissioners before we begin? Okay. Do your magic of a technology.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
A mute going on here. We do not hear any voice, and it looks like you're talking.
Can you hear me, Chairman? Hello?
How do we let him know?
Maybe
Do you think he can hear us?
if you
I can
hear
hear
us,
you.
Kaiser, can you shake your head?
Ah, I
Hello?
might have heard you something.
Kaiser, can you speak so that we can hear you?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
I'm not sure he can.
Our audio is on mute.
There's a slash through the audio there. Well, that's us?
Yes.
Hello?
So that screen that we're seeing there is under our control?
Hello?
This is like my last trial.
I present to you.
Hello? Hello?
Jury, you need.
I assure you, I'm not a cat.
Hello?
Can't stand there feeling like doing some interpretive dance to try to get me.
I didn't sign him yet, but I can. Oh, wait a minute. I think I gave him to you. I didn't sign him, but I gave you the folder there. We had to vote first, don't we? That's Brownfield.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, very good.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Okay, so how do we do this? Doug went to go fix it.
You want to talk to the control room. You want to move on to the next agenda? I think we can circle back.
Oh, the slash is gone. Can you hear us? Wave your hand. Okay, so you can hear us. Now, you speak and then see if we can hear you.
Hello? Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you.
Shall I log out and then log back in?
Okay, you are muted somehow on your end. I don't know if we did that to you, but might want to check, make sure we didn't, or we did. For presentation purposes, we're going to have to hear you, so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, good
All right.
evening, everybody.
okay. I think you can proceed and we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we got the awkwardness behind us. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak in this virtual fashion. I'm going to bring up my slides so you're seeing the slides and not just two versions of me. First of all, I want to congratulate the leadership, particularly the Planning Commission and the staff, for going through the master planning process. I had the pleasure of perusing the document, and it's an incredible achievement. And I think you're going through all of the right steps now with your zoning code and exploring options that are available for implementing the master plan. And I'm happy to discuss with you, perhaps without sounding like a salesperson, because I'm not, for the form-based code. It is a tool, and it is a tool that has been used now for over 25 years, 30 years in the modern world. But it's a tool that we have used in our past, and we just forgot it over the last century or so, and we have drifted away. And I think we're rediscovering how to make places and how to make cities and how to accomplish the visions, the community's vision. I want to also suggest, because I saw a strong preference and a strong voice in your master plan, and understandably so, because you're a beautiful community. And I think when I was up there, I think I might have passed through this community, and I recollect wonderful areas, wonderful Main Street, and I can also Google Drive today. So clearly you have wonderful historic neighborhoods, and preservation of the neighborhood is first and foremost. You want to preserve the areas that you have within your town. And then the form-based code is an excellent tool that helps you do that, because you're not talking about a conventional zoning ordinance, which tends to be very two-dimensional. You're talking about spatially. And when you talk spatially, you can address different contexts, and that's the strength of a form-based code. It is also a transformational tool, but a transformational tool that takes very much into consideration the context. So the results are one that are more predictable. The process that it offers is a streamlined process, and there are various components of those processes. So what I thought I'd do today is essentially give you an introduction of the subject matter, and then maybe end by teasing you with some of the design aspects and some of the processes that are available. So if you don't happen to take the advanced courses or the advanced version of this, you at least get some benefit of some of the things that you can address with design design both of the public realm as well as the private realm. And that includes the streets and the open spaces. And then also talk a little bit about the process, the variety of processes that are available that offer and reinforce the predictable nature that is the strength of a form-based code. So with that, I want to jump into the presentation, but I hope this is a conversational piece, one that I know, Joseph, thank you for the introduction, for the very kind introduction. And I know Joseph mentioned that we have some breaks that are natural, but if you have some questions, please jump in. This is much more for your benefit than for my benefit of going through the presentation. So my goal in this is to make sure that you get a good flavor of what the strengths are for the form-based code and the options that are available for development regulations. So with that, I want to ask you a question saying, why are codes necessary? Now, in a typical classroom environment, if I was there physically, I would wait for your responses, and most of you would, and including myself, before I got exposed to form-based code, would say, well, you need regulations, and regulations are oftentimes restrictive. It tells you you can do this, you can do that, you should be doing this. So it restricts. But I sort of have a paradigm shift in my understanding of the regulations, and I want to propose to you that it's not so much the restrictive nature, but it's the liberative nature. Many of you got to this meeting driving in your car on the streets. There were red lights. People stopped at the red lights. You were confident that if you drove in your lane, that people would stay in their lane, and if they were changing lanes, they would give directions. So all of these regulations that we have in place are meant to provide you the freedom to practically do, and whatever we do, we depend on each other. So for example, in the world of development, these regulations give me the freedom to invest my life savings, whether I have a single family home that I've invested in, or I'm building a new project that is per the vision, per the city's vision, the master plan, and it gives me confidence that my investment will be protected because everything around me will be at least to that standard or more because of the regulations that are in place. And somebody's not going to come up across the street and mess up my investment. So that's the freedom. Philip Howard, whose quote you see on the screen, he's an attorney and a law and an author. His most recent book, Death of Common Sense, he talks about regulations and laws that aspire to have completeness, don't leave any room for questions of priority or practicality. It doesn't involve judgment. And we all remember Winston Churchill when he said that laws and rules become too numerous and too complex can sometimes be perceived to be arbitrary or burdensome, leading to a decline in voluntary compliance and a greater likelihood for disregard for the law. So what we are striving for is that balance, is that happy balance within predictability and flexibility. You want predictable outcomes, but you also want to encourage creativity in your built environment. There is no such thing, and I mention this again and again, there is no such thing as a perfect code. It's really a dial that you can turn in terms of how predictable you want, how much flexibility you want to afford in your code. And that changes from time to time in conditions, as conditions change in the real estate market, as conditions within your city change, you may want to switch that dial perhaps to be more predictable or to allow some level of flexibility. So I think, yeah.
We can't see your screen. If you wanted to share your screen, if that was your intention.
Oh, I do. I'm so sorry.
We're happy to see you, but if you want us to see your screen, we're unable to see it at this point.
Thank you so much. for letting me know that. I'm gonna share my screen. Please tell me if you can see my screen now.
Yes, if you can make it full screen, then that would be great, but we can see your screen. Yes, that's perfect.
I will.
Perfect.
So I'll walk through these three codes. And I think we're caught up now. So I think in terms of codes, we want that, we want predictability, but we also want to offer some flexibility. So it's always going to be a pull and a stretch and in how we want to code, what kind of discretionary review process we want to have. Because if you have a more predictable, more sort of a complete code where you have spelled out every last detail, obviously then you're not allowing for a lot of creativity, but then you can probably do things at the permit counter. So you're looking to streamline the review process, but also offer some flexibility. And we can review towards the end some of the options that are available for administrative processes for implementing through a form-based code. So our master plans often talk about things that we want, things that we desire. And sometimes they also include illustrations and pictures. And most of the pictures that we include are the ones that you have on the left. And I could have very well, rather than pick a Main Street environment, I could have picked a neighborhood or a subdivision to illustrate the same point, or a natural area and with a hamlet and an area that is sprawling within the natural areas. So this applies throughout the transit. So we want the realm that we have described that in our master plans on the left, but we keep getting the stuff on the right, and there is a disconnect because our master plans want that, but we keep getting that. So what is that link? The links happens to be conventional code because we have the master plan. Pardon me, the terminology general plan is what we use here in California, but elsewhere in the world, it's the master plan. So the master plan has land use categories, and in the land use categories, we tell people and we tell, as a community, we know where we want a Main Street environment, where we want a commercial environment, where we want a commercial uses, where we want the industrial uses, where we want the residential uses. And then we have a thoroughfare system or a roadway system that talks about capacity and volume and speed, saying if this growth is going to occur in this area at this rate, what is the final capacity for that street that we need to have? So these things are covered in our general plan, in our master plan document. And then we try and translate that into the world of zoning. And we essentially mirror the land use plan with a zoning plan with zoning classifications. What's missing in all of this is any sort of description of what kind of place we want. Is it the downtown or is it the commercial strip center? Because that red color on your map is not going to tell you what kind of place. It will allow both, but it won't tell you what kind of place you want. So if it's not restricting it and it's allowing it, that's what the market delivers. It's not going to tell you whether you have neighborhoods, but if your code also allows subdivisions, then you get subdivisions. I'll just give you two examples. Typical conventional codes have tools such as setbacks. And if I were to tell you, and I haven't read your code, but your code probably has a minimum setback requirement. And if I ask you, with a minimum setback of 15 feet, where can I place my building? You would probably say 15 feet, and you'd be right. But if somebody were to say, I can place it 20, well, they're right too. If somebody would come in saying, well, you know what, minimum setback of 15 feet, I can place my building at 150 feet from the street, they're right as well. And in that, you get a typical commercial strip center as opposed to Main Street environment. So the codes aren't very specific and aren't very tied to a specific place that is described in your master plan. It allows for a variety of variations. It's not very predictable. The other aspect, the other culprit in the conventional zone is a floor area ratio. Floor area ratio, and we'll go through this in the definition. A floor area ratio is how much you can actually build on a lot. So a floor area of 1 would be essentially you could extrude the entire lot as a tub of butter, 1 floor, and that would be okay. But what if I told you that you could use 8 of your lot and create an 8-story building? That would be allowed as well, unless you have some height restrictions. So what floor area ratio does is it's not very predictable in its form. It allows the various combinations and permutations of how you can build, what mass you can build. And oftentimes the tension happens when you take a 4-story or 6-story building that's allowed through a floor area ratio, and it gets built next to a single family residence. That conflict is again accentuated by the unpredictability of the law. So this is the definition that we've been using, and the Form-Based Code Institute brought this into being, and essentially we'll unpack this. But the 3 things that I want you to focus on is the codes offer a predictable built result, something that you have talked about in your master plan. They offer a quality public realm, again, something that you have in your master plan, by using physical form, and we'll unpack this, what we mean by physical form, rather than separation of uses. So these are the 3 main items, and we'll go through each and every segment of the definition and unpack that and try to understand the definition, and then we'll move on to the various qualifying or characteristic features of a form-based code. So form-based code offer predictable results in a high-quality public realm. So what is a public realm? The public realm includes two main things. It includes streets that are used by everybody, and it includes open spaces. Now, these are 2 things that are least regulated in a conventional code. And we can talk about that a little later. But the public realm is essentially that area that is shaped by the private realm. So the 2 sides of the building, everything in between that is a public realm. So the 2 sides of private realm are essentially forming the volumetric expression or the spatial expression of what that public realm is. And it includes a vehicular ring where cars are moving. In many cases, you may have a transit line or a bus rapid transit, but mostly it's a vehicular realm. And then you have a pedestrian realm. In some cases, you may have a bike lane in the middle. But just look at the ratio here. The ratio of the amount of land that is dedicated to the pedestrian realm versus the vehicular realm. Now, we've designed our streets and our cities primarily for the automobile. The automobile is here to stay. We want to accommodate that, but we also want to accommodate various other objectives in terms of quality of life, in terms of economic development, in terms of health, in terms of mobility, and all of those are not being met in most typical suburban corridors. So it's looking at that public realm, the design of the public realm. And again, it's formed by the frontages that you have at the base of the building. It starts at the frontage of the base of the building. The frontage is important. You have the sidewalk next to it. You may have a bike lane. You may have a on-street parking. And then you have vehicular realm. So that's the public realm, the design of that public realm. The other thing in terms of public realm is the open spaces. And these open spaces were oftentimes crafted, and I'm showing you a plan from John Nolan's 1930 plan of Green Garden Terrace in Erie, Pennsylvania. Look at that space in the middle, the court. How often do you see that in a conventional zoning ordinance? You don't, because these types of spaces are not conceptualized within the realm of a conventional zone. But in a form-based code, you can get to that level of detail with fair amount of alacrity and create places of lasting meaning. So in this case, there's an image, this is by WROK, of a pocket park. And it's essentially a building type that wraps around and allows for a small pocket park as a public realm. In addition to that, form-based codes use physical form rather than separation of uses. So let's unpack that. Now, any regulations, and this could be your regulation in your city or anywhere else, have three main components. They control use. In some cases, the uses are allowed. Some cases, they are restricted. Some cases, they are not outright not allowed. And in some cases, you have some additional controls. It could be conditional use or some other term that you use to have more control over how that use performs. In addition to controlling uses, you have some management issues in terms of how this use is managed. For example, how much parking does it need? What are the landscape requirements? So there's some management items. What are the if performance standards, for example, associated with the use? Does it produce any noise, any odor? Those kind of standards are also seen in your zoning ordinance. And then there are some form standards. These form standards are essentially how tall, how far is it setback. It may include the FAR, which is again a very abstract way to control form. But this is what I found in Google Earth on one of your streets, and it is a single use with parking in the front. And the management is, you have a parking lot. You probably have some screening requirements in the back as it meets the rear. There are some form requirements as to setbacks. It might be minimum setback. It may be a very specific setback. And then probably you have some height. So this is within the realm of a conventional zone. What form-based code does is it has the same amount of management standards. The use standards are not the primary control mechanism. The uses are more broadly defined. So rather than listing 500 uses of retail types, it just says retail use and defines that retail use in the definition section. So it's more sort of market-based because the market changes. You may have, Paul Crawford, who passed away a decade or so ago, had studied the zoning ordinances, and he found uses such as hammam, bath, within the use classification. And then he alphabetically went up and he saw bath, hammam again appeared. So retail uses and uses such as this are invariably changing over time. So broadly defined based on market management are the same. But what's important is, and what's necessary, and the way to understand form-based code is that the form standards are more defined, are more predictable. So in a form-based code, you still have controls of uses. It's more market-based. You still have the same level of management items, but the form standards are more specific. So rather than having a minimum standard for a setback, you might say it needs to be at between 5 to 10 feet. You're more specific in where you place your building with the street frontage. It allows mixed uses. So in this case, again, this is a building right across the street from the CVS, and it's within your city. It allows for a mixed use setting with a different type of frontage on the ground level. Parking is probably in the back or in a structured format. So those are management issues. The use is a mixed use setting. Now, they are regulations. They are not design guidelines, and this is important to understand. And as I was talking earlier, the image to the middle, in the middle shows R40, and this is just one of the arcane zoning classifications that we have. And for example, in this case, R40 allows for an FAR of 1. So as I mentioned earlier, you can extrude the entire building mass 1 story. Now, design guideline comes in and says, okay, we need to articulate this. We need to break the building's mass, push this mass up, pull that building out. But essentially, you still have a tub of water. You just addressing the front of that block or that building mass. It continues the discretionary review, and it tends to politicize the planning process because there is a lot of room for subjective interpretation for what that articulation needs to be. But what form-based code does is it comes in and breaks that box, breaks that block into its constituent matter, which is if you have a Main Street environment that has a different type of building. It could accommodate a mixed-use building, the one that you saw in the previous slide, perhaps 2-3 stories. And as it meets the neighborhood in the back, it could have an alley with perhaps a variety of other building types. It could be a duplex right next to the properties at front, the corridor, going all the way back to a single-family residence. So it's based on the context. The context of a main street is different than the context of a connecting street that connects to the main street, which is completely different than the context of a neighborhood street. But in a conventional zone, they're all the same. So you can essentially just repeat that mass, that articulation all over without actually breaking the mass to make context. It's not about density. The density in both of these scenarios is the exact same. It's how that density is articulated. And I'm just talking about, in this case, building mass, but you can talk about open spaces, you can talk about frontages, and street types and street design, and they're all based on different contexts. Is it a main street? Is it a connecting street that connects to the main street? Is it an alley? And what kind of configuration does the alley take? Are people taking access from the alley? Is it a neighborhood street? It is a lot more easier to administer. The citizens know what the end result is because you know the built product. If I'm in a neighborhood and living off a neighborhood street, I'm going to see that neighborhood looking home, house-shaped form that will be across the street from me. But if I'm on a main street, then yeah, it could have a higher intensity mixed-use development. And developers and property owners know the process is easier, it is streamlined, and offers many opportunities and options. Form-based code defaults to a walkable environment. And all of the standards are focused on, and when I say walkable, obviously I mean bikeable and whatever the latest trend is for personal mobility. But in a conventional zone, for example, in terms of parking, you have lower parking requirements because it's more walking, more access to transit. Conventional zones tend to have higher parking requirement. The public realm and the public spaces are well defined. They don't have to be huge spaces because if you're in an urban area, in a downtown area, a small open space, a small plaza as the one that you saw is more usable and creates a vibrant environment than what you tend to see in suburban areas where you have requirements for open spaces that are based on acreages and tend to be not designed around the urban form. So they tend to be the left out parcels saying, okay, I can't build here, this is my open space. Or the area in the front that tends to be, in many cases, the front yard that doesn't really offer any benefit, any place-making benefit to the public. There's a concept of blended density, and this is a sort of an advanced topic that we cover in the design session, but I'll mention it and I'll introduce it, and if there are any questions, we can talk about this. What you see here, pardon me, what you see here at the bottom is a blended density. So it essentially takes, there are some areas of this block at the bottom, the third image at the bottom, that may be over an FAR of 1. It may be 1.5, maybe 1.3. Certainly the frontages along the main street. But as you step back, the density goes down. So the average blended density of that block is still 1. So it's not about density, it's about how you blend it within the context that you have. form-based codes mixed-use environments and uses that are flexible and with operational characteristics. So I want to stop here and see if you have any questions about densities before, pardon me, about the definition before we get into the form-based code essentials.
Any other commissioners have questions for our speaker? All right, you can proceed. At the moment, we have nothing we'd like to ask. We'd like to see what else you got.
Is this I mean is this something that's making sense? Am I are you understanding what I'm speaking, what I'm talking about in terms of form-based concept? I can elaborate further on any one point. I think if you understand the definition, everything from here on onwards will become easier. So I think it's understanding the definition and the comparison to the conventional code and why this is a predictable environment and producing better public realm is such an important point. And the fact that it is a better tie-in to the places that are described and better delivery mechanism to the places that are described in your master plan.
Are you going to show us, are you going to go through some examples of application?
Yes, sir. That's coming next.
Okay, I think that's what I'd be looking for.
Okay, wonderful. Let me then proceed just. So let me see. Share screen. Okay, you can still see my screen, Chairman, members of the commission?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the very first important essential component is you mentioned that form-based code defaults to a walkable urbanism, and that walkable urbanism is the one that's described in your master plan. So it's essentially delivering what's called out in the master plan. So a specific place needs to be described within your master plan that you can then create codes to. So the master planning is an important component. Your vision, where is the community going? And I'll walk you through this screen that you're seeing. It's one of the communities here that we did planning for and coding work here in the Southern California area. It's the very first image shows areas of growth and areas of stability. The orange area shows area of growth. The yellow area shows areas of stability. These are wonderful neighborhoods that are not going to be impacted by growth. The orange areas have been identified for growth. Even in those areas, as you move across, the next one shows the green infrastructure. It shows all of the assets that are within the community and how we can connect those assets in a green infrastructure, whether that's the greenways or blueways or existing streets and reimagining those streets as shaded sidewalks that begin to connect all of the open spaces within the city and all of the assets within the city. But then also looking at the next diagram, which says, well, within the areas of growth, there are essentially the corridors where we are seeing the underperforming properties. And there are some areas in our downtown, so the downtown, the station area, and some areas to the north along the freeway that offer the most opportunities for growth. So we have shrunk, we looked at the areas, and within the areas of growth, we have shrunk that further to essentially be the corridors and the centers within the city. And then we have an illustrated plan. But then the land use plan actually talks about the different land use categories, whether that's variety of open spaces, the districts that exist within, and many of them are, again, stable residential districts. But there are some that are neighborhoods that allow for variety of building types, variety of housing types to be accommodated. And then corridors, whether that's a corridor within the downtown area or the corridor that connects various assets within the city, and then looking at the industrial areas. So this is a very place-based planning approach that looks at the geography of places. And by the geography of places, I mean districts, neighborhoods, corridors, centers, downtown areas, neighborhood centers. Guess what? That is exactly what you have in your master plan, because your master plan is place-based. And kudos for the people, for the community, for bringing this to fruition. Because if you see, and I don't have to know your city just to look at this, and I know where the areas of growth are, where the opportunities lie, the areas that you want to preserve, the residential areas within your community, and the opportunities that some of the neighborhood centers offer, and then some activity centers, whether those are industrial areas or districts within your community. So this is an important first component of a form-based code. Because if you take a conventional code and you don't have the understanding, you just have the color red, that red could mean a number of things. But in this case, you have defined what that red is, whether that's an activity center, whether it's downtown, whether it's a corridor, and there are different characteristics with those places. So that understanding is a vital first step, and you've already taken that, which is excellent, excellent work. The code is formed with the cooperation of a variety of departments, because what the form-based code does and does so well, and if you think about the definition, we're talking about the public realm. Most conventional codes, and the ones here in California and the ones that I'm familiar with in Texas and in New Jersey, where I've worked, and in Indiana and Washington, they're all most of them don't include any discussion about the public realm. The streets are left to the public works department, and I'm sorry, you might have an engineering department, but there's a department that essentially works on design of the streets and the maintenance of the streets. And there's a disconnect right there. In this case, the form-based code brings them to the table early on. Because what happens is you have your master plan, you have worked on your master plan, you worked on your code, but if your public works is not involved, or if your fire department is not involved and they have some standards that haven't been incorporated in your code, well, that breaks down the code. It doesn't work anymore, because then you're talking about exceptions to which increases the unpredictability of the outcome. So bringing all of the departments, whether that's landscaping, public works, economic development, and I mentioned economic development because it's an important component of city building, of productive use of the land, because a strip center with parking in the front, and the one that I shared, a CVS, has a different productivity ratio than the building just across the street. At a minimum, that building across the street is 3 times more productive. But what we have found in studies here in California and elsewhere, based on how you use the land, those buildings that are mixed use, that are downtown buildings, corridor buildings, are far more productive, far more, and many times 10 to 15 times more productive in terms of the fiscal revenue they produce when compared to a commercial strip center with parking, or a big box retail establishment. Although it may appear big, check the numbers. The numbers are staggering and eye-opening. So all of those discussions need to be part of the form-based code as you move forward in establishing what that desired form for the master plan that's called in the master plan, or for the code needs to be. Is the code easy to navigate? This is an important component because people fear most what they don't understand. and if you don't understand it, it's open to interpretation. It's open to interpretation for Joseph or whoever follows him in that chair years from now after he's retired. may have a different interpretation. So having clarity and helping people understand, even the development community, even the community itself, how to use the code. And there are various steps. You start with the property, you find your property on the regulating plan, you review the development standards, you review the frontage standards, the uses, signs, and the other standards. Now notice what I mentioned here. I started with the public realm. I started with everything that was public before I got into the private, before I got into the users. So review the subdivision standards, review the street standards, review what the frontage standards are before you review your uses that are required, that are allowed in the building. So you start with the public realm design, because that is the realm that most of us engage in, right? We engage in our streets. The buildings are used by its inhabitants, and they engage in them, they enjoy them. Most of us experience our city in the public realm, yet that's the least designed aspect of our codes. And then having a page that helps people understand how the code is organized, understanding the development standards. For example, putting the code there and helping people understand how the building needs to be placed. What are the building form standards within this? Where is the parking location? Where can you find information about the signs, open spaces, building components, access, landscape requirements? All of these things are laid out on a couple of pages that help people and guide through the rest of the document. Part of this is also understanding the design principles. We often talk about things like diverse and integrated mix. That's interesting. Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Does it allow for shared uses? Curated street level experiences. These are very design terms that architects, urban designers understand, but spelling them out in the code removes the ambiguity and removes the discretionary part, saying this is what we mean by curated experience. There needs to be privacy, visibility, shelter, shade, exposure. A new building, new residential buildings, formal living rooms need to be elevated from the street. So if it's a residential use, it needs to have a different frontage than a retail use. All of those details are important and therefore called out. Human-centric design. What do you mean by that? Locating streets, buildings on the street's edge makes the pedestrian feel more comfortable. Adding details on that are human scale makes, again, the pedestrian feel comfortable. We have a scale that's 6 feet tall. And in many cases, you may want to have grandeur in the building. That's fine for the civic buildings. But for most buildings, it needs to have a human scale design. A rich public realm, what do you mean by that? Streets and open spaces. What are some of the standards and where can we find them? Context sensitive design. How is that building being modulated so that it can meet its context? Whether it's the main street, the side street, or a neighboring neighborhood street. Form-based codes are spatial codes, so they're graphically easy to understand. In this case, this is showing the development regulations for a corridor. And it shows you where the building can be placed graphically. It shows you the height requirements, the different height requirements for the ground level, and how are they different from the levels above, and what kind of roof do you have. This becomes very interesting when the building is right next to a single-family residential neighborhood that is one story. So what happens to the height and what happens to the roof, whether it's a flat roof or a sloping roof, these are important considerations. Where is the parking placed? Where can it be placed? Is it on ground? If it's on ground, what is the setback requirements? What signs are allowed depending on the context? Where are the open spaces on the right-hand side? The building size and separation requirements, so that, again, the volumetric expressions are human scale. The frontage elements, the encroachments, and the access is the access from the front. If it's a vehicular access, can the vehicular access be from a side street or an alley rather than rather than a front Main Street environment. So all of those things are graphically depicted and easy to understand. Again, if you follow the code, you have less to fear. But if it's just standards that are not graphically designed, not graphically illustrated, then it becomes difficult and it leaves room for interpretation. This is again an important component. Does it regulate the right of the way? And I'm just illustrating here the streets. This is Baldwin Park, downtown area. Ramona is an important corridor within the city, and showing the existing conditions of that street. By the way, these are diagrams that are part of a specific plan. A specific plan includes both the master plan and the code in one document. But I would argue that these sections also need to be in your form-based code. The specifics of that section can vary. And here's what I mean by that. Because a street is never, 60 feet wide. So you can say a main street is 60 feet wide. Well, in some places it's 60 feet wide, and if you survey it, in some places you may find it to be 65 feet wide. In the corner it might be different, and in the intersection it might be different. So all of those interesting nuances can either be spelled out, or you can leave it up to the discretion of the Public Works Director and the Community Development Director. But the design concept of that public realm, of how much, what is a portion of the sidewalk, what are the types of street trees, all of the design features are spelled out in the master plan and then carried forward in the code. The specific dimensions, whether the sidewalk is 5 feet or 5 feet 6 inches, depends again on the survey drawing and what you find out in the real world. But also this shows a progression. It's at the very right-hand side, at the bottom, you are seeing the final state. And at the very top left-hand side, you are seeing the initial state. And this shows a progression of how this code can transition over a period of time, depending on development activity that's occurring, so that the first developers are not burdened with doing the final state. That it's all working, they're all plugging into a master plan that is thought out, that builds out to a final form. And that final form is shown at the bottom, on the bottom right. This is an interesting graphic that I got from Suzanne Skulch. She was the planning director then of City of Grand Rapids. I believe she's a city manager now there. This is a course that I did in one of your planning conferences up north in Michigan. And she shared this diagram with me, and this is a cross section of a street, and it has the road width described. It has the lane configurations, the current ADT, the walk score, public utilities, private utilities, bus stop, landmarks within that street, and land users. I mean, understanding the streets within your city in this level of detail gives you a good appreciation of what are the aspects that are working and what are the aspects that could work better. So I just show this as an example and as something that is being done in a city near you. This is an incredibly important component. Again, one that is seldom talked about, and in your city and many cities that we worked in now are built out. So subdivision is sort of an afterthought. But it's essentially crafting. When you think about what we talked about public streets, we talked about open space, and that collectively forms the public realm. Now, who designs that public realm? When does it get designed? Well, it gets designed at the very start when you lay out the subdivision, when you lay out the streets, when you lay out the blocks and the lots. Rarely do you call out open space. If they're called out more sort of as a technical requirement, saying here's where I'm meeting my 20% requirement, as opposed to that space being used to define the urban realm. And the graphic to the top is essentially a sketch by Leon Creer that shows how rich the open space environment can be within your community, and how defining a feature of that could it be. And the graphic at the bottom is one that we've used several times in our code. It essentially talks about, and think about even now today, you probably have within your city large blocks. This could be essentially commercial lots that have huge parking areas, single box retail establishments. Well, how do you redevelop them? And essentially, if you have a block size parcel introducing streets, breaking that parcel down with streets, introducing alleys, then the lot configuration gets you to that final stage. If you break it down that way, you get a human scale environment that is most desirable as opposed to a block level building. A block level building may be appropriate in many districts, but within a neighborhood setting or a downtown setting where the increment of entrance of access is every 50 feet. And by that I mean every 50 feet you have a storefront window, or every 25 or 30 feet you have a door that leads up to a residential unit if it's a row house. In that case, human scale environment and accessible human scale buildings is incredibly important. And this progression shows how do you get from a large parcel to the granular level detail that you desire in your downtown and your neighborhoods. I'm going to take a break. If there are any questions, otherwise I'll just keep going. And if you can give me a time check, that would be helpful as well. If I need to speed up, I can speed up.
What's that?
I said they need to speed it up a little bit.
Okay, we have a request to speed it up a little bit. You're at 8 o'clock. I don't know how long you've been talking, but you're on slide 19, so you're just about halfway through there.
Okay, I'll speed up. Thank you. So let me just go through this, and I'll speed up in my comments, because I think with understanding now of the form-based code, we can understand its component. The first very important component, regulating plan. This is a key. This is very much like a zoning map, which shows you the different districts, the zones within in this case the downtown area. In this case, the downtown has three districts: the downtown core, Main Street, and downtown edge. And to this key are tied all of the standards. So, for example, the next standard is a development standard, and on the right-hand side, you see the downtown regulating plan. You see the downtown edge. The standards for the downtown edge are called out on these 2 pages, beginning with where do you place the building, where do you place the parking, how tall can the building be, what is the ground floor versus the story above, where are the on-site open spaces and where can they be located, building size and separation requirements, frontage elements, encroachments, and where the building can be accessed. One important component, and this is just something that we have learned by gaining a lot of scars on our back, is when you have a corridor downtown area, the edge becomes incredibly important, where it meets the residential neighborhood, the single family in many cases. So the transition to that single family residential can either be if you have a large enough parcel on that parcel itself. So the building can transition. You can have a building that responds to the main street, but as it goes in the back, you have a different building type that responds to the residential context. If you have a large enough lot. But if you don't have a large enough lot, then you need to address that with the next lot that is available, the incremental lot, because that's going to be impacted. So downtown edge conditions are incredibly important. In this case, the diagram that you see on the right-hand side is essentially showing how you can address it if you don't have, for example, a large enough lot within the lot itself, where you allow for more mass on the main street environment, and the similar mass is taken off from the back and put it in the front. So you have a more contextual building when it meets the residential neighborhood in the back. The codes can also include building types, and this is a typology based on study of the unique types that you find within your community. In many cases, you may find that some are not within your community but are desirable. They represent everything from a house scale building, a single family residences, a duplex, a row house, to a block scale building that covers the entire blocks. And it could be a flex building, a liner building, or a hybrid or core building that you may have in the downtown area. And you can combine these two building types as desired, and you can come up with a new one if you so desire. But what's happening here is essentially you're studying your context and you're basing the standards on the context that you've studied. And so all of these buildings have a very historical configuration in terms of how they're disposed on the lot, their spatial configuration, and how and what use happens within that spatial configuration. So all of those standards are then called out. So it's more contextual based because it's coming out from the study of the environment, study of the city itself. Building types are then, as I was mentioning, the standards are called out, the lot sizes, the pedestrian access, the frontages that these different buildings have, the different frontages that are allowed, where the vehicle access happens, where the open spaces are provided, and some are shared, some are private open spaces in different building types. Frontage types, again, if you go back to that very first diagram I showed, at the base of the building is the frontage type. So the frontage type is where the building meets the site. What is that frontage type? For example, in a retail establishment, you want a storefront. But if it's a residential use, you don't want a storefront. You want to elevate that frontage so that you have privacy for the people who are living inside. So the frontages are again, very specific to the context that you have within the area. And again, you can combine for a building, you can have a variety of frontages for that building depending on different contexts that it's sitting in. I've already talked about street types. Different street types have different purposes, different contexts. Is it a street that's primarily used as a corridor for traffic where speed and volume is important, or is it a street in a main street environment or a neighborhood street context that allows for response to the adjacent land uses, that allows for a variety of mobility options, and that allows for walkability and bikeability. Many cases we call out the street trees because the street trees are the defining character, and oftentimes we know and we've heard that if you have limited budget and you want to change the character of your streets, street trees will get you very close to your final stage. I mean, people may argue about the building, about the architecture, but very few people will argue about the street trees, and they provide the comfort and the shade from heat. Open spaces, if your code is one that is calling out special characteristics, such as in this case a boulevard, or a public park, or a specific area, then those open spaces can be called out. This is the continuum of open spaces, by the way. In this code, we start at the private realm, which could be the balconies that are required, or the terrace gardens that may be required, at the building level or the lot level in terms of yards, or at the block level in terms of parks that could be provided, or for larger subdivisions, or for larger lots, it could be a neighborhood park. Or if you're along a linear corridor, it might be the frontage that you provide along that linear corridor. Land uses, as I had mentioned, are covered, but these are not pages and pages. They are covered more broadly. So for example, in retail, we just have about 6 or 7 land uses here that are broadly defined that intend to cover and anticipate what might happen in the future, and then give the some level of discretion to the community development director to allow for like uses, because we can't anticipate what the uses are going to be in the future. And certainly some of the uses that we thought were going to be with us, like a video store, are no longer with us. So the land uses are more market-based. Signs are again called out within the context, and they are part of the architecture. rather than being freestanding signs. They can enhance the quality of the environment and vary according to different context. The form-based code, and this is by the way, everything I'm going to cover from here on onwards is not part of 101. It's just to give you a flavor of some of the different options that are available. So I'm going to go through this real quick, and then if there are questions, we can talk about those. There are a variety of ways you can organize a form-based code. As I mentioned earlier, it can be organized within the greenfield for new development, for infill. It can be a preservation tool, or preservation and conservation tool, or it can be a growth and a transformative tool. There are various ways to deploy the form-based code. You're familiar with the Transact because your master plan talks about the Transact. The Transact offers a good way to organize the standards based on the different characteristics that you find, the different within the different zones. So all of the standards that you see are varied. For example, in this case, you're seeing the intersection, the curb where you place the trees may differ in a T1 or a T2 versus a T6. A T6 may actually place the tree right at the curb's edge, but in a T3 environment, you may want to bring that tree closer to the building. So different standards are based on different contexts, on different transit zones. In Ventura, in downtown area, we did a modified transact because it becomes difficult, for example, to imagine the world in just 6 transit zones, particularly if you're within the downtown area and the midtown area. How is a T4 in a downtown different than a T4 in the midtown area along the corridor versus T4 that adjusts and is part of a neighborhood? So we had to break it further down, but certainly the framework was a transit based. In Farmers Branch, Texas, we did a frontage based code with Federal Madden. And here the standards, as we talked about earlier, the standards are defined based on the public realm being the streets and the open space. So here the codes are actually saying that if your frontage is along this street, then it will have these standards. So the standards are coming not from the lot, but they're coming from the frontage that is different for different streets. And in this case, it's a street base. So the streets are essentially the defining feature, not again the lots. So if you're within this street, if your lot falls within this street, then the building heights and the setbacks are going to be this much. It requires a high level of skill to administer this. In many cases where this has happened, these are new towns, and you have a town architect working very closely, but it allows for a high degree of flexibility. The building type basis is one of the earlier codes, one of the premier codes that came out about 35 years now for Seaside. It was based on allowing a select range of building types that are tied to zone, and typically building type based codes are used for small planning areas. So if you're coding for a downtown area or a neighborhood, you can identify certain building types and standards associated with those building types. I want to just a couple of slides now, and want to talk about some of the issues that tend to come up here in California. We have something called density bonus. So if you're providing affordable housing, you get a density bonus. Well, what's a final form for the density bonus? So it allows a little bit more attention and a little more detail about what that final form could be. So you have the regulating plan, but in the corridor where the corridor adjusts and is next to the residential neighborhood, there are some additional standards that are put in place. For example, setbacks and conditions, different conditions. For example, if you have an alley, that setback is 5 feet, but if you don't have an alley, then that setback is 10 feet, and there's a step back requirement. But if you have a density bonus in the very top section that you see, the blue line, that's the density bonus that you get, and how you place it and where you place the density bonus. You don't place it next to the residential neighborhood, you place it next to the Main Street environment, the Mission Boulevard, which in this case in South Pasadena is a Main Street environment. So again, this is a level of detail that is allowed within the form-based code that becomes very difficult in a conventional code because it's a two-dimensional code. Here you're dealing in a spatial environment. So you can talk about space setbacks. And one thing to keep in mind, obviously, is when you step it back, you want to have an understanding of the architecture and how the buildings are constructed. So you're not creating inordinate or buildings that cost a whole lot because your setback requirements don't follow the laws of construction. I want to give you an example here. This is a building that was designed by Mullen Polozoid and the project by Mullen Polozoid, and they were partners in South Pasadena in our general plan and our downtown specific plan project. And what you see here is a project that is right next to the light rail station. And the purple area that you see in the middle is the site. And what you see there is a purple box. Don't see what's inside the box, but essentially that box is what the code would allow. The context here is very important. The context here is that image that you see on the upper right, which is 1 or 2 story bungalows, beautiful bungalows in South Pasadena that's just a block away or less than a block away from the station. So the code would allow you to build a 3-story building, a block of a 3-story building. But in this case, the form is articulated based on the context. So the building that is close to the station is a 2-story block scale building, and where it meets the residential neighborhood, which is the 1-story bungalow context, the building is essentially broken down into a series of building types that are bungalows that are 3 stories, and the 3rd story is hidden within the roof. So you have a context-sensitive approach that instead of the building across the street in the existing neighborhood is essentially 1 unit, and in this case, the bungalows that are designed as part of this project in a contextual manner accommodate 8 units for each bungalow. So you have the form that is very similar, that creates that respects the context, but then as it meets the more urban context, the building form changes. So this is what I was describing earlier when I showed you the tub of butter and how the design guidelines would just kind of articulate that box, but this is actually breaking that box into constituents to respect what the context is and to design for the context, which allows for much more graceful manner to accommodate growth within a residential context. The code obviously needs to be in open participatory public process. This is if you're talking about predictable outcome and predictable process, the Planning Commission in developing the code, this is the time for the community to define the standards and to spell out what the requirements are. And you're essentially at the very start of this, and this informative session is primarily to understand what the options are, form-based code being one of the options that can be considered for different areas of the city. But then as you move through this process, the public participatory process becomes really important. And the format that you have, and I'm not there, but I've been in this setting for the last 30 years, is absolutely the worst format for public participation, where you have people sitting up on a dais and the people get 2 minutes or 3 minutes to to have their say. I think it needs to be collaborative process, and more like a charrette that has people sitting across this table and really spending time getting participation, not input, because what you get in a current setting is input, 2 minutes of input from the public. And I think moving from that to a collaborative setting, which is what I think your master plan was developed as in that setting as well, works excellent, works the same way for a form-based code. And the Planning Commission hearing is primarily just sort of the final process that acknowledges all the work that happened in the open participatory process and moves it forward. But it does not replace the public participatory process. And we've already talked about this. It's based on a community master plan. This is incredibly important. This is what we used to do when I was in planning offices in the city of Ventura and in Texas, planning director there. We took training very seriously, training the staff, and that's what your staff is also doing: training the community, training the staff, and training the planning commission. But also going out and taking a look at projects across town and traveling. And seeing what's working, what's not working, even within your city, doing an assessment of projects that have been built and approved, saying we got this wrong and we need to fix our code so we can avoid this in the future. So this is an important component. Final two or three thoughts. This always comes up, saying, okay, non-conforming. We have buildings that are already within our community, and this is again like a dial. You can take a strong position of no additions if you want overnight change. If you have the political will and the political support and the community support, that's an option. But at the other end, you can allow additions that bring the structure closer to compliance. So allowing additions that gradually bring it in compliance, and there are a couple of other interim options. So I think as you look at your codes, you want to give some serious consideration to where you fall within this spectrum. Do you want to allow changes? How do you want to allow changes? And you want to eventually get to that final built-out state. It may not be in the first phase. It may be in the subsequent phases. But that's something that you can consider as you're setting up the code. Oftentimes we get complaints or concerns. It'll limit creative expression. This is primarily from the architectural community. And what we're trying to do is control the very few aspects of the urban form that are important with precise standards. And those are the ones that I talked about, right? The streets, the frontages, the private frontages, and open spaces. And then everything else, in terms of the building's character and style, and remember, I haven't spoken about style at all, but if you're in a historic community and you have historic context, then you can certainly incorporate style within the form-based code setting as guidelines. But the important standards, the form-defining standards, are standards, and those are controlled. And then a lot is left up to the market. The land users are what the market would allow. So there is a lot of flexibility here. How this code is disposed can be in three different formats. Again, this is a little advanced in terms of where we cover this is primarily in illustration of form-based code. But I wanted to introduce this to you so you can be thinking about how this can be, because each of these formats have their own benefits and downsides. A mandatory code is, this is the new law and you must follow this. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. The other option is a parallel option, saying, okay, whatever rights you have currently, you retain them. So we're not upsetting the apple cart. You retain all of your rights, but we're giving you some additional ones if you want in this parallel option, if you so choose. And if you so choose, that becomes then the law. And then third option is floating, saying it's not right, it's not ripe for redevelopment. It's something that we want to consider in the future. The property owners may not be currently interested, or the political will may not be there, so you float it. It's available for people to access, and you have incentives that you offer. When people are ready to redevelop their parcel, they may have access to that floating code. So these are the three ways that you can dispense that. And this is what I was talking about in terms of a review process. One of the things a form-based code does is it reviews in a very spatial manner, which is slightly different than what most planning commissions are used to today, which is review of through conventional code. This format is more collaborative. And this is what happens in Dallas. This is what we put in place in Ventura and other places that we work, where we have a collaborative process. It could be the planning commission, it could be a small segment of the planning commission, or a design committee, or a town architect that essentially sits around a table, and it's a discussion among peers, trying to search for that optimum with the community participation. In the back is a community, trying to search through that win-win situation where the developer wins as well as the community wins. And this process is more conducive to producing better results, more predictable results that benefit both the community and the developer. And with that, I will pause, and very happy to take any questions that the commission or the community may have.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think, I learned a few things about form-based code that I didn't understand before. As you can imagine, not everyone is going to watch this this training in an hour. We're going to have people that may receive misinformation. They may hear things in rumors and, kind of subscribe to that the sky is falling just by the mere fact that we have this on tonight's agenda to look at as an option. So my question to you is, over the years of doing this, what are two common misconceptions or myths that you see when people come and say, oh, this is, going to do this and this and this, that we can kind of understand ahead of time so we can focus on what this actually is and not focus on things that are fundamentally untrue?
That's an excellent question. I think the way to combat misinformation is to take control of that information, to provide it and make it readily available. I think where we find most concern is things that you either don't understand, that you have questions of, and because this is a new format, this is not something that people are used to, and this is new for you. Let alone for the community who is not engaged in development every day. So helping them understand is in a number of ways. This training is just one, but getting ahead of the information, providing the information.
Yeah, I think my question is, what do you hear? What are the most common, when people come to, let's say, the first engagement? I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned now that there's going to be pawn shops on every corner as long as they build a nice building. What kind of things do you hear that people come, concerned with when they come to these charrettes or when they come to public comment? What are the things people most misinterpret or misunderstand or aren't willing to understand?
Yeah, thank you for the question again. I was hopefully trying to get to that in my long-winded way, but thank you for prompting me. It's when people come to the hearings, it's the same thing that you and I are concerned about. When we have our home, we have our property. How is it gonna be impacted? How is this development going to impact my property? If you're a property owner, then the other concern is, I have these sets of rights today, and how are those going to change? As I mentioned before, the way we offer form-based codes is all of your rights that you currently have, you have, and you keep them. This is another way to look at. We are adding to your options that you have. You can build mixed use. You can build closer to the street. You can do all of these things that otherwise you may not be able to under your current code. So you provide enough incentives so they choose the right way to do it. If you are a property owner, if you are a property owner and you currently have a building, the other thing that I just mentioned a little while back, non-conforming. I have this building and it's X, Y, and Z. So, it could be an auto use or, as you mentioned, pawn shop. And I want to continue to use it. You're not going to allow this in the future. Well, that's the city has the option. The planning commission has an option. How you want to consider it, whether you want to continue to allow that use, or you want to discontinue to allow it, but allow it as a non-conforming use. And yeah, you can have this use and then amortize it. And this is what we've done in places like Farmers Branch in Texas, where you amortize the investment that individual, that landowner has made on the property, saying, okay, you have made this investment on this property, or you're seeking this addition, and that addition is value this X. In terms of your recouping that value, you'll take about 5 years. So this use is amortized. After 5 years, it goes away. So you have various ways to address non-conformity. So I think having a clear strategy on how you want to address non-conforming from a property owner's perspective would be certainly wise in advance. And then, as I mentioned, if you're a property owner, just as I am, or you are, the concern would be what is being built, what is the final outcome, how is it going to impact my property and my neighborhood, and providing clear information about that. And then also providing a context saying, did you know this could be built in your current, I mean, if I and that's what we did in the South Pasadena context. Did you know you could build a 3-story building in just across the street under current laws, and it could be a discretionary, non-discretionary permit because it's allowed, but the form-based code articulates it and provides a better option, better context for that development. So I think those are some of the concerns that we have found from our property owners, from an architectural viewpoint, from the designer's viewpoint. It tends to be saying you're restricting creativity, but I think where we are focused, our focus is on the public realm, not so much on the private realm, and we are only restricting those aspects of the public realm that are within the private realm, such as the frontages, that have a direct consequence on the public realm. That's justified based on the master plan, but the rest is left up to the market. The feedback that we've gotten, I just spoke to one of the cities that we just wrote a code for that was adopted last year, and they floated this code in the International Shopping Center conference, and a few other developers that are interested, and they're really receptive. They're really receptive because this opens up a variety of options, offers them a predictable process. From the community's viewpoint, the community is more comfortable with the built environment. I mean, if I am the community, and what has been delivered in the past 3 decades, I'm understandably upset. Because if this is growth, give me less of it, not more. And I think you need to make a case for why this is going to be better, and how is this going to be. And I think the onus is upon us, us as the planners, us as designers, us as policymakers and standard and people who set standards in place.
Good, thank you.
All right, are there other questions for our presenter? Mr. Cantina?
So yeah, I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to give us this presentation. It certainly helped explain quite a bit. My questions are related to, and I'll use some of the language from your slide, related to the I guess creative expression that usually comes when designers I guess have more free reign in designing buildings. Oftentimes the actual design of a building, its aesthetics, its uniqueness are pretty integral to the fabric of a particular neighborhood or a streetscape. And so when we look at, in the words of form-based codes, you know, defining that controlled and clear, precise standard for the building form, but then providing guidelines for the architectural style, both of those are, you know, purposefully, limiting is not the right word, but they're defining in their own different ways. Can you provide some examples on how, when implementing these sort of defining rules, whether they're an actual, you know, precise standard or it's a guideline, how you can protect against not controlling the creative expression of the designer too much to where you then get more of a monoculture type of design aesthetic that comes out of it? Hopefully that question made sense.
No, it's one that we hear quite often. So you're right on 100%. I think a few thoughts to share. Creative expression. I used to be naive enough, maybe a decade ago or so, to think that you can completely outlaw by writing codes any sort of discretionary review, that you can have just a building permit and get a building permit, and you can write codes that are that restricted. And I've learned that, you know, it's not desirable. It's not good to do that kind of stuff. To write codes that completely wipe out creativity. I think there is also room for some sort of judgment to be used, and that judgment could be used either at the planning commission or with a town architect, saying, hey, I know your standard says this, but we have a unique idea. And I think most of the codes that we write allow for, we don't call them special exceptions, and we don't call them variances. There's a term that is skipping my mind, but it's intended to primarily just allow for deviations that offer comparable or better results. And the test happens in front of whatever body you think is appropriate to do that, because there's some discretionary review. And it may be appropriate in this case to involve the community, because they're not part of that flexible environment. They are expecting one thing in terms of predictability, but this is allowing them. So it may have some sort of discretionary review, and that could be at the design review committee or with a town architect or with the planning commission. So having codes that allow that flexibility for projects. And then we also allow, for example, there are background buildings. There are buildings that just, you know, that form the fabric of the city. And not each building is crying out for attention. And there are certain buildings that are civic buildings or the buildings of grandeur. And in this case, and in the form-based code, we don't code, for example, for civic buildings. For example, a church. Most of the codes put church in residential zoning. It's completely asinine to govern a church or a religious building or a municipal building or a museum and because they are one-off. But when you have every building wanting to be a one-off, you lose that fabric, you lose that cohesive background setting that is also desirable. So your codes are that happy balance between predictability and flexibility, in that you need to allow not variances, because variances are based on hardship. This is primarily based on creative expression. Um, and it's based on coming up with a better or comparable solution without impacting use and value of neighboring properties. So there are findings that you have to meet to deviate from those from some of the standards that I mentioned. Does that answer your question, Scott?
I think so. The way I just received your answer was some things are black and white, other things are gray.
And I think that they should be gray because they allow for creative expressions. And there are various ways you can allow that in your code. Civic buildings being one of them. The other one is to allow for some discretionary review for special buildings, and particularly for buildings that want to and deserve a creative expression. And people want to do something better, saying, yeah, I understand your code says this, but have you thought of this? This is an unintended consequence of your code. And that's why I mentioned there is no such thing as a perfect code. You cannot anticipate and rule out, and you should not. But I think you should have some basic parameters under which you should not fall, because otherwise the city fabric gets damaged.
All right, do other commissioners have questions or comments? Ms. Cooper?
Just again, thank you for the presentation. I think it's a lot of information that we all have to digest, and I think a lot of questions that came up, I don't know if necessarily can be answered tonight, but I think sparks our ongoing talks with everyone in the room and that's not here in the room. What he had said, it's the things that are black and white and other things that are gray. I think it's deciphering what are our deal breakers of this must be and what others we have discretion to kind of change, and that's going to be the ongoing conversation as well. I really appreciate, and I think I'm more of a visual person, so seeing kind of, I call them picture pages, so you actually see a graphic along with the writing instead of trying to read through a zoning or a code book. I think it's much easier for the general public to understand, answer their questions, and you don't need an expert to go through and help decode that for you as you just an average Joe trying to plan out for a building addition on your home, or a small commercial building owner or business owner that wants to move forward. So I think it'll help with compliance as well as asking the right questions and providing something that everyone's looking for. So again, thank you.
All right. I knew you were deep in thought. Go ahead.
So today, if today a given geographic area in our community has a particular zoning classification, right now that classification defines all of the possible uses that are permitted in that zone. How do you rewrite, or how do you transition from that highly specific use-based zoning into forms?
Commissioner Douglas, two different things. The two different, the form is a different discussion the use, and that's the intended purpose of the form-based code. It's separating out, like we don't need the separation of use that happens in the conventional zone. We do allow and we do address uses in form-based code. So, for example, the district that you mentioned may have, let's say, 100 users, and those 100 users, we would try and see what are the similar users. We would try and gauge what are the users that are no longer relevant, that may be carry-ons from 2-3 decades, and think and contemplate uses that may happen in the future, and then try and club similar uses under specific categories, and then define those categories, allowing the community development director some discretion, or the planning commission in this case, many cases, some discretion to allow light uses. So it's looking at use from a very sort of a more general rather than a very strict interpretation, and allowing market demand. So if the market say video stores are no longer viable, but the next use is some AI-driven use, then or experiential retail. Then that happens. That is allowed. Just because it's not mentioned in your code doesn't mean that you have to go through a special process. So that's what I'm suggesting in terms of use. All of the uses that you currently have, you can still have, and all of the restrictions that you have, and the operational and management issues that you have associated with the users can still be in the form-based code. What the form-based code then does is adds additional focus on the public realm, the design of the streets, and the important aspects of the public realm, which is the frontage standards and standards for open space that are missing, and then other standards within the private realm that that may need to be tweaked to create more predictability, such as setbacks. Rather than having a minimum setback, you may want to have a defined setback. Rather than having FARs, you may want to have a height and setback and discuss context. What is the context of this area, and what are the different? So there are variations in the district that you just maybe described within your city, and some part of that district might be in a Main Street environment, some part maybe in a neighborhood environment, and they both deserve contextual standards. So this form-based allows you to do that rather than just say, through this entire block, this is the standard.
Thanks.
All right. I'm going to thank you too for the informative presentation. It's something that I've struggled with trying to figure out what form-based codes are. On the surface, even in your presentation, my first impression was that this is an anti-modernist thing. Form follows function. We're going to get rid of that, and we're going to go to Michael Graves' postmodernism. We're going to decorate a box. But I don't think that's what it is. After hearing you, I think that we could possibly use this, or let me ask the question, can we use this street-based or frontage-based, form-based coding seems like something that could be done along our corridors. Do you have to select either a use-based code or a form-based code, or these can be mixed?
So when you're talking about a citywide context, obviously there are areas of change, and in terms of where you put your energies, it may be in many cases desirable to code the areas that are changing, and if those areas that are changing or are suspect to additional development, additional growth pressures that may impact existing residential neighborhoods. And just as an example, then you want to code those areas first so that you can address where change is occurring, and those can be immediately useful, as opposed to going into areas that are stable, where there is very little to be gained from changing the existing codes, existing regulations, except a lot of public involvement from individual property owners. So just looking at citywide and looking at areas where you have the most to gain in the quickest fashion, and getting closer to what your master plan is calling you, which is to encourage growth in this area. So corridors, downtown areas, activity centers, where you want to direct growth. I think it makes sense to, and growth in a walkable environment, it makes sense to focus on those areas first.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. Are there other questions? How about from staff? Do you have questions for our presenter? All right. Anything else? All right. We thank you, Mr. Rangwala, and appreciate your time. And are you going to make this slide presentation that we got on our package is slightly different than the one you showed us? I don't know if it would be wise for you to forward the one you showed. It had about 3 or 4 or 5 different slides, just so you know.
Most certainly, Chairman, I'll make those slides available. I also want to suggest that if there are questions that are still burning in your head, or if I have failed to address any questions to your satisfaction, please send me your questions. I will give it some more thought, and happy to continue the dialogue. I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you this evening in this virtual format, and I wish you lots of good luck. You are on the right path, and you have a good momentum with your master plan, so you're doing all the right things.
Okay, and I appreciate the offer for further dialogue, because I think sometimes questions have to percolate before they come up to the surface. So we appreciate that. You may well hear from some of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we are now moving on to item number 5, unfinished business. This is the conditional rezoning of 2800 West 14 Mile, SP 250710. I believe this has been postponed.
Yes, and the petitioner has requested to further postpone the item. So it would be wise to make a motion and to adopt a motion as such.
The motion to postpone until, I read it was till September 9th? Okay. Is there any discussion of this, or does somebody like to make a motion to approve a postponement of this item to September 9th?
So, is it, I mean, this is a big project where we gave a lot of feedback, and is it better just to postpone, I don't want to say indefinitely, but until the petitioner is ready to come back, or do we do it month to month? I mean, is there any difference in the timeline here?
The problem is, in a technical sense, under Robert's Rules of Order, if you're following them to the letter, a motion to postpone that doesn't prescribe a definite time to reconvene on it acts to kill the project, kill the motion.
And you can't put a date out there and then have them come earlier as well?
That would be an internal issue with notice, probably more than anything else.
So we said postpone and till the whatever January meeting or February meeting. I have no idea what their timeline is. They could come back. But then if next month they're ready, they could come back if they work with staff. I don't want to get into the game of like and this is not just for this one, but we see this often where it only takes a minute and I'm making it 10 times longer, but it just seems to me it's, if we constantly get some agenda items and they're delayed over and over and over again, it's just like, what are we doing? You know what I mean?
I would just say I think we are using the small board rules. Those are the reference that we incorporate, not the whole Robert's Rules of Order. I think our bylaws say that. So I don't know if that matters. But.
Well, and I think too, maybe down the road, we should get a timeline from the petitioner to say, look, do you need 1 month? Do you need 6 months? Help us understand. Because I think for us to continue to, in perpetuity, do something, at some point in time, we do it 2 or 3, 4 times, and we're just like, vote no, kill it, nobody's here. Like, we can't just keep putting it on the agenda. But okay, I asked the question just to try to streamline things, but.
Well, okay, so what would happen there is that the staff would have to contact the petitioner and or they would have to come before us and ask for more time. I don't know how it works.
I think if you adopt a motion, make and adopt a motion tonight to postpone it until the next regularly scheduled meeting, we'll certainly reach out, staff will reach out to the petitioner to express your opinions and comments provided tonight. And hopefully they take it with take it serious, and they come back with something to look at or give you a timeline, say, we need more time. This is the exact time. We will be here at this particular meeting with a complete set of drawings to once again review.
Right. I'm willing to give them the time they need. I just don't want to have to do this every month. You know what I mean?
And in their comments to us, they didn't specify an exact time frame in which they would be uncertainly giving revised drawings.
Okay.
Well, I also don't see a legal reason why the motion couldn't also incorporate leave to allow planning staff to administratively move it to the following meeting.
That's perfectly acceptable to me, yes.
So two things, excuse me, two things. One, I agree with the mayor in the sense that I think if there is no mechanism to sort of prevent the applicant from continually requesting postponement, that's a disservice to other applicants in the sense that if the staff in setting an agenda believes this project's coming forward, has to reasonably allot and figure that there's a certain amount of time for discussion for this project, which then limits the amount of time for other projects to be discussed and sort of manage the agendas appropriately. If we're continually having a project that's supposed to be on the agenda get postponed, well, we've now removed that time for other applicants that could have been on that agenda, and creates a very difficult, task for staff to manage these agendas appropriately. So I'm with the mayor in the sense that I don't necessarily mind giving a postponement, but I do want to make sure that it's clear that this can't necessarily be a regular thing. The other point I wanted to make, or I guess clarification that I have is, and I'm not saying that I'm in favor of this, this is a request from the petitioner to postpone this agenda item, correct?
Yes.
Not one that we're obligated to accept.
That's correct.
Okay. So theoretically, we could still hold the hearing, have the discussion, and take action on the project, which could certainly be a denial. Just because they requested a postponement doesn't mean that we postpone the item, and we could theoretically discuss it today. I'm not saying I'm in favor of that. I just want to make sure I'm understanding and level setting what we're doing.
Yes, with the one notation that we did notice and hold a public hearing at last month's meeting. That public hearing was open, comment was provided, it was closed. So it's at the discretion of the chair to reopen the public hearing at any given time when it's discussed at another meeting, but there's no, as I had noted at the last month's meeting at the end of that agenda item, we don't provide any more additional public notice since the public hearing was held. And yes.
Commissioner Douglas.
So at our last meeting, I mean, we kind of blindsided them. They didn't really know, and when we said, how about next month? They said, okay, next month, not really knowing what that was going to entail. So this time, is it they who have asked for the September meeting, and could they just as easily have asked to postpone it until October?
Yes.
So this is their wish.
Okay.
If that's the case, then.
Yeah, if that's the
Changes
case,
like
they
that.
said September 9th, then I'm willing to do that.
Then, yeah, that's what I think.
But I think the feedback needs to be like, it's not a month-to-month thing. We can't, to Commissioner Gantina's point, we can't, go month-to-month on stuff. We don't want to set a precedent with that. We can go a month and then maybe another month if there's some developments, something happens, but I don't think it's good policy just to keep rolling agenda items like.
So I'll move approval to move this item to the September 9th Planning Commission agenda.
I'll second.
All right. Is there discussion of this motion? Is that, it's a no, okay. All right, I'll just say that, okay, I wasn't here last week, or last month, so I didn't have a chance to watch the movie, but now I'm gonna do it. So because I got another month. but I'll get caught up. Maybe in the future, one of the things we can think about, if it's a big project with this sort of feedback, we've done this in the past, sometimes we've had the petitioner come in and do a working session, if you recall, and maybe it's, I wasn't here, so I don't know. It sounds like maybe this one could have used it, but something to keep in mind, I guess. All right, is there further discussion? The motion by Commissioner Douglas is to approve the postponement until September 9th. Second by Mr. Gantino. Further discussion of this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. The item is moved to the following month. Okay. Next thing, review of zoning, other business. Number 6, review of zoning ordinance requests for proposal. Mr. Murphy.
At your July meeting, you reviewed the responses that we received for the request for qualifications to retain a firm to help us write a new zoning ordinance. You narrowed that list down to 6 firms, which are then capable of receiving the request for proposals, which is the draft that you have in front of you tonight. I will note that we reference in the draft RFP portions of the process that we anticipate them to engage the public. Based on the presentation tonight, I think there's some tweaking that we would like to do in the office to the document to add some components of gaining some public input during the process of creating form-based codes, should we go down that road, versus some of the language that's limited in the draft that you see in front of you. So unless you'd like to go through the draft, if you have any particular comments or concerns or things you believe are missing, need to be corrected, added, any of those items, we're looking to get your comments before we make this the final version and then send it out again to those 6 firms and give them an opportunity to submit responses for you to review and narrow it down to a smaller list of firms to actually interview prior to making a recommendation to enter into contract that the City Commission would have to approve.
All right, are there questions? Mr. Cooper.
So in reading this, I'm going to err to the staff and their writing of their RFP and the expertise on it. I am noticing you already had something in here for firms responding to this RFP must specify their proposed public engagement methods. So are you proposing that we are going to give a specific criteria of what we're expecting, or we're going to leave that to the vendor to provide what they think is appropriate?
Yes, we definitely want to know what they believe has successfully worked with other communities that they've have been in contract with, and develop something specific to Royal Oak. But I think that there needs to be a little bit of additional language to identify that we're looking for a certain amount of public engagement to develop the form-based codes, engage the public, residents, developers, property owners in the creation of those form-based codes. So you'll notice in the RFP, draft RFP, it indicates that while we certainly have set our goals through the master plan process, I think some of those refined elements of the actual form-based codes, the language that's referenced in developing them, does need to involve the public a little bit more in crafting those. And so we'll be including some additional language, and again, each of those firms will provide methodologies that they've used in the past and what has been successful, and ultimately we will have to work with them to tailor something that will produce positive results for our process.
Mr. Douglas, you want to comment first?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just want to say I was very impressed with this document, with the specification of using all of the most timely and best practices and best technologies, opening the door, inviting the use of artificial intelligence, which I'm reading and seeing is could be of great value in terms of helping people navigate the process and making the operations of our staff time more efficient. And this is my constant requirement. I'm very happy with the sentence, the definition of the requirement for a communications package and the specification that this shall be included in the fixed bid amount. Staff shall not be responsible for content or release. And certainly our communications staff will play a role in identifying media outlets potentially. But I definitely want to see that bidders provide all of the communications tools, the graphic design, the memes, the copy, the text, the schedules, the timing, the delivery, and this is very specific for that. So thank you for that. Good job.
The mayor had asked Kaiser a very astute question at the end of his presentation, and it was, how do we overcome the naysayers? How do we educate the public? And that's really a critical element. And so we want to make sure that we have a firm that's on retainer that's capable of doing that, and that they're responsible for doing that. Like you said, we'll work with them, but they need to do the heavy lifting on that part, and we'll be looking for extensive experience to, again, tailor to our needs, but their extensive experience in doing that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, if we're not all having the same conversation, we're not doing anything at all. And so if we have folks that aren't informed and are listening to bad information in the interwebs, you know, what are you exchanging? You know what I mean? There's facts and then there's not facts. And when those collide, it doesn't make any sort of progress whatsoever.
As Kaiser noted, we fear the unknown. That's a large, that's a significant point in having him conduct his presentation today. Again, it's for staff, it's for the Planning Commission members, and it is unquestionably for the public. So this is one of the first educational components that we want to present to the community is here's an understanding and an introduction to form-based codes, and as we move forward through the creation of the zoning ordinance, it'll get more technical, it'll get more specific, and you'll be involved. To what degree, that's going to be a recommendation from the firm that we choose.
Okay, I'm a little curious what you're thinking. Obviously you're not going to write it right now, but what do you think you need to add here? Because I noticed on page 2 here, it says firms responding to RFP must specify their proposed public engagement methods. Engagement shall be limited to soliciting feedback from, and then there's a list of people. Is this something that you think needs to be changed?
Just a minor tweak. It goes on to say limited to ensuring that the zoning ordinance is clear, easy to navigate, and understandable. And I think that developing the form-based codes, there needs to be a public engagement component of that. Also on that back end, once they're written and they're drafted, we need to give them to people and say, okay, try and use these, make sense of them, and then give us your feedback. But we also need to engage the public in creating the actual language first.
Okay.
So there'll be a tiny tweak.
Okay, so what kind of a motion would we need to incorporate the tiny tweak? Or
I don't think you do. I just want to make sure that there's nothing else that you think, again, needs to be corrected, added, modified. You don't necessarily need to, but if you want to adopt a motion to direct staff to finalize the RFP and to release it to the 6 consultants, that would be wise. I'll note that there is a time frame at the bottom of the RFP as well, and we'll verbalize that. So we hope tonight to finalize the RFP and then tomorrow to issue it to those 6 firms. Their deadline for questions to staff would be September the 30th, and then we'll get responses back to them. Their deadline to submit a bid response would be the end of October, October 29th. So that's a pretty long lead time. But we're asking them to work, to go out and find other firms with lots of other specialties. We're asking them to do a lot. And they need to go out and get a lot of sub-consultants with very precise expertise in what they do. And that takes time. So we want to make sure we give them enough time. I believe that is appropriate at the end of October. So ideally, we would review them at their responses at the November meeting and then have interviews in December. with a recommendation at the beginning of the year, and shortly thereafter, a contract award for the city commission to consider. So while that seems like and it is, several months out, it's a pretty defined timeline, and we will keep you moving, and there'll be, again, more training, more discussions, more studies before we get to the actual commencement of the process itself.
All right, so the question from in my mind is there a motion to direct staff to finalize the request for proposal and proceed to release it according to the timeline?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Cooper. Is there discussion of the motion? Mr. Cooper.
Would it be prudent, once these edits are made, that this is redistributed in next month's minutes of the revisions as they were sent?
You want the staff to give the planning commission the final version?
Just so we have it on
Oh,
record for
absolutely.
minutes. Yep.
Yes. When it goes out to the consultants, the very next email will be to you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any deal breakers on here. I think it's just a little bit more specificity. Well, I said that word. I thought I was going to stumble it. I think it makes perfect sense, and I don't see anything else that I would personally like to add, unless anybody else has any other changes, omissions.
All right, and of course, the final version is part of the public record anyways. I don't know if it is going to be a part of our next meeting minutes. I suppose it could be, but that's something that's available. It's a public record, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion of the motion to direct staff to finalize the request for proposal and release it according to the schedule? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call for the voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that is adopted. So we'll look forward to that. Okay, next, other business. Item is non-action items. Administrative site plan approvals is next.
Just for your informational purposes.
All right, no further comments on that from staff?
No.
Okay, any comments, questions by the commissioners? Okay, we'll set that aside. Then we have the Michigan planner for May and June.
Same thing. I think all of you do get a copy of that. I believe you're all members of the Michigan Planning Association. So articles of interest, keeping current on planning topics of the day.
All right, and the last one is City of Southfield Master Plan Notice.
Yes, just like we did, they're required under state act to notify adjacent communities, so you are receiving those.
Okay, well, where are they in the process there?
It says they're working at the beginning stages of amending their master plan to incorporate elements of their strategic plan.
Okay, they're just starting. Okay.
Yes.
All right, is there anything that any of the commissioners would like to put on the record before we, or staff?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
I will reference the fact that at the last zoning board of appeals meeting, there was a motion adopted by the zoning board of appeals to request a joint session with the planning commission. Some of you may recall several years ago. Well, time flies, I don't remember.
On Zoom, we did it.
Yeah, there was a virtual meeting. So that offer has been extended to you. If you would like us to accommodate that, we can work internally to do that.
All right, how do the commissioners react to the invitation from the zoning board to have a joint meeting? Now, this would be a special meeting.
Not necessarily, but I like the last time it was held, it was actually a planning commission meeting, but it was a work session, a joint study session with the zoning board of appeals. Technically, it was a planning commission meeting, and that one happened to be, if I remember correctly, I think that happened to be on a regularly scheduled meeting where there were no other agenda items, so it was ideal.
Okay, well, we don't know if we have that sort of thing coming up yet, do we?
Currently, September is extraordinarily light, so I think we could accommodate that. We're gearing up, like we did an introduction to form-based codes today. Staff is gearing up some other material for you to review. we were looking to do that in September. We can push that off to October. There's no objection to that.
All right, is the zoning board getting the form-based code training?
No, they're not. No, they're not. So the zoning board of appeals, at the preamble that they read at the beginning of every one of their meetings, let's see if I can remember it from all my years of being staff for the zoning board of appeals. It says, the zoning board of appeals does not write the zoning ordinance, but it has the ability to grant variances in cases of hardships or practical difficulties. So that's first sentence is key. Zoning board of appeals does not write the zoning ordinance. That is the planning commission's directive under the state act to make those recommendations for text amendments and map amendments to the city commission for their adoption. So it is beneficial at times to have the joint meetings, as we discovered last time, because the zoning board of appeals does have a particular vantage point in how they administer it as a quasi-judicial body, how they administer the zoning ordinance. So soliciting their feedback on cases that they've heard, decisions that they've made, are to inform you on how you would like to amend the zoning ordinance potentially. But that duty is exclusively left to the planning commission.
Okay, I think reporting on repeated fact patterns would be something
Yes.
helpful, so.
Yes.
Mr. Gantino.
I would agree that the joint session we had I'd be in favor of doing it again, because the one we had last time, it was a good discussion. There was some very specific topics that became priorities out of that discussion that we were then able to, I think, direct staff on being more focused at looking at. And I think being able to, and there was some positive outcomes from that whole experience and discussion. So I think based on that experience, I don't think we fixed all the problems out of that meeting. So doing it again, I think would be very beneficial, because there will probably be some new things that get highlighted out of that we can then prioritize.
All right, so do we need to give you just, do we need to make a motion to ask you to do this? Or is it, they invited us, so how does it work?
They extended the offer. So it can be something that you conduct at your next regularly scheduled meeting. It can be a special meeting. It can be any of those options. We would entertain, staff would entertain your regularly scheduled September meeting, presuming that zoning board of appeals members, or at least a majority of them, were capable of making that scheduled date. Since the room's already reserved, it's on your calendars, it's on our calendars. It's an ideal setting, but it doesn't have to be what is agreed upon.
Mr. Douglas.
Yeah, would we put it in a different room, a different space? Because obviously we don't have room for both bodies at this table. And it just seems like a round table would foster discussion and conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, I think so. It makes it more informal. I mean, one of you would have to sit at the dais, and one would have to sit in the audience, and that just creates an uncomfortable setting. So you're absolutely correct. In a more informal setting is appropriate. I do believe that the adjacent conference room 122 would be able to accommodate everyone at the table, and obviously it's a public meeting, so the public is encouraged to come, and there's enough seats in that room to arguably hold the public that would come. If not, we can work to have overflow in here or in the lobby.
Good, yeah.
It can be accommodated.
All right. So what do we want to do? Do we want to?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to add. Can we bill this, can we structure this as a work session, not as an official meeting? I mean, no, we don't want to, I don't know that we're going to, do we need to make decisions in this?
No.
So maybe treat it as a work session, not as an official meeting with no action to be taken.
Mm-hmm. I'll solicit Mr. Markham's comments just to make sure that that is accurate, and that to avoid anyone's interest in possibly doing that and saying, oh, we can't do that because it's a study session. So just the affirmation, hopefully, of those comments.
I think it would be fine to do. I don't think it would be an open meeting violation to do
No, it will be an
Well,
open
it'll be-
meeting.
yeah.
Correct.
It's just no motions will be made
Correct.
other than to convene and adjourn.
Correct. It's an open meeting without any public hearings is essentially what it is.
Oh,
Would that also, if we did it that way, would that allow us to put it at 6 o'clock? You know, put it in front of the meeting?
We would have to make sure that that room is available. I don't have the ability to do that right now, but we can certainly do that tomorrow morning and confirm that. You can make the motion.
We can make the motion that you can explore that possibility.
Yeah, because we don't need to necessarily make that decision tonight. Staff can set that based on your comments, can set that if the room is available.
Okay,
And would do the correct notice.
okay. So do we need to make a motion to give you that direction?
I think it would be wise.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it then. I would like to move to direct staff to coordinate a joint session with the Zoning Board of Appeals for one of our next upcoming regularly scheduled meetings of the Planning Commission, preferably at 6 p.m. just prior to that regularly scheduled Planning Commission, whichever one it gets scheduled before.
And that would be a working
A
session?
working session, yes.
Okay. The motion is to direct staff to explore the possibility at one of our next several upcoming meetings to organize a meeting, joint meeting with the ZBA as a work session at 6 o'clock ahead of the meeting. Is there a second?
I will second.
All right, second by Mr. Cooper. Any further discussion of this motion? Hearing none, I'm going to call for the voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and you are directed.
Yeah, and the Zoning Board of Appeals has a meeting on Thursday night, so that can be relayed to them as well, and hopefully they have their calendars available for that day and time.
All right. Okay, so staff put something on record. Anybody else, staff, council, commissioners would like to put anything on the record as we wind up here? Nothing from that side, nothing from this side. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. I'm
Scary
going to
delay.
assume there's no discussion of this, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We have to do the brown.
Don't go anywhere though, because we're going to move on to wearing your other hat.
Oh, yes.
Can you give it a little pause? This part won't be recorded. We just record the